Idolatry in 13 minutes. What exactly is the practice of idolatry? What are the severe consequences for idolatry? Are you guilty of it? Do not make idols or set up an image, or a sacred stone for yourselves, and do not place a carved stone in your land to bow down before it. For I am the Lord your God. In rebellion to this great commandment, the Israelites, in ancient times, worshipped false gods. God had established the Abrahamic covenant, in which his betrothal to his people included future blessings and prosperity. However, this covenant of Abraham was violated by God's chosen people, Israel. The violation of the sacred covenant of Abraham was like a broken sacred marriage contract. In spite of the covenant between God and his people, the wicked kings of Israel built altars of worship to idols, and turned the hearts of the people away from God towards idol worship. Even before the Israelites were a monarchy of ruling kings, they worshipped the idols of foreign people. For example, while enslaved in Egypt, they paid tribute to the bull god, Apis, and the cow goddess, Hathor. Both Apis and Hathor were associated with fertility. Apis was also symbolized as the god of strength and war. Nevertheless, these idols of Egypt could not see, hear, talk, or work miracles. It was the God of Israel who had provided for his people, and who had delivered them. For instance, God had miraculously freed the Israelites from Egyptian slavery, but they gave credit of their freedom to an idol of Egypt. So while Moses tarried in the holy mountain of God, they made a golden calf and worshipped it. During the worship of the golden calf, the Israelites had a wild celebration in which there were possible sexual orgies, drunkenness, and adultery. Exodus chapter 32 verse 6 describes this idolatrous celebration as an affair of immorality. Verse 6 states, "The people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play." Rose up to play suggests that there were drunken and sexual activities, which were common in idolatrous fertility cults such as the worship of Baal. For the grievous sin of idolatry, God ordered the deaths of the idolaters among the camp of the Israelites. On this day, under God's instructions, the devout Levites slew 3,000 Israelites. Among the deaths of the 3,000 were all of the participants in the idolatrous act, including men, women, and probably children. For the act of idolatry, God also greatly afflicted the Israelites with illness, and forced them to drink the melted golden calf. Other than the golden calf, The Israelites worshipped principal Canaanite gods and goddesses. For instance, Baal and Ashtoreth were honored by the Israelites. Furthermore, the Israelites greatly offended God when they sacrificed their sons and daughters to Baal. God forbid ritual sacrifice of humans to idols, and called for the death penalty against those who were involved in it. Other severe penalties for idolatry were announced by God's prophets. There were three important prophets, who God sent to warn about the dangers of idolatry among many others. They are Moses, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Moses delivered the laws of God, which prohibited the worship of idols. These laws, due to their great importance, are the first two mandates of the Ten Commandments: "You shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make idols." Moses reminded the Israelites about how important it was to obey the laws against forbidden practices of idolatry. To not obey the first and second mandates of the Ten Commandments would prevent the Israelites from entering into the land of promise, and would lead to death itself. Further, Moses warned the Israelites that Baal worship had only brought about death to the unfaithful. Moses was not alone in a mission to warn the people about punishments for idolatry. Jeremiah and Ezekiel too had critical warnings for the idolatry of the people. Jeremiah's and Ezekiel's predictions are about a gloomy future for idolaters. Because of the terrible sin of idolatry, Jeremiah predicted that the Israelites would be taken captive by a very powerful enemy. Just as Jeremiah, Ezekiel too foresaw the Israelites' punishment for idolatry. Ezekiel prophesied the Israelites' destruction and future exile from their homeland. As the prophets had foretold, the idolatry of the Israelites led to all kinds of curses on the land and on the people. Curses of death, enslavement, and conquest of enemies. One of the main curses of idolatry was chastisement by enemies. A very sad commentary on the history of the Israelites is that due to mainly idolatry, they were conquered over and over again by their enemies. The conquerors of the Israelites were Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Egyptian captivity of the Israelites lasted for 400 years or 430 years. Assyrian captivity of the Israelites lasted for 200 years. Babylonian captivity of the Israelites lasted for 70 years. In 70 AD the Romans defeated and forced the Israelites into a long period of exile, which lasted from 70 AD until centuries later. The conquerors of the Israelites not only slaughtered the people, but they destroyed and confiscated the property. The precious treasures from the temple of the Lord were stolen, and the temple of the Lord was demolished. In Old Testament times, the Israelites were disobedient to God by worshiping idols, and paid a severe price for their idolatry. Today, many are following the same destructive path of the Israelites through some form of idolatry. So what is your idol? According to Colossians chapter 3 verse 5, idolatry is about more than the worship of a false god of stone. For instance, Colossians chapter 3 verse 5 points to several different forms of idolatry. Colossians chapter 3 verse 5 points out, "Put to death whatever belongs to your earthly nature." Fornication, impurity, lust, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. Like the Israelites in ancient times, modern-day idolaters are in rebellion against God. These idolaters too will be subject to the curses and wrath of God. Moreover, the Bible confirms that idolaters will be sentenced to the lake of fire. In order to escape this horrible fate of judgment, please humble yourself, and pray. Ask the Lord to deliver you from the idols in your life. Pray this prayer. Lord, deliver me from any exalted image, lustful thought, or sinful action that I have placed before you. Replace the idols in my life with a genuine commitment to serve you with all of my mind, heart, and soul. Amen.